All right, everybody, welcome to the Roundtable. I am Brad Mccoy, and alongside my co-host Tyson Gentry, we got a different type of video for you all today. This is going to start off our divisional breakdowns in the NFL. We're going to be breaking down each and every division in the NFL before we kick it off. This is strictly football analysis. We will have gambling videos, all our gambling picks before the season starts, and later videos. So make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on social media below, so that when these videos come out, you'll be alongside of us and you're alerted to our new videos. Like I said, today's the NFC South. Everybody reported for training camp today. We're ready to go, Tyson. How are you? And happy football season to you officially.
Hey, man, happy football season. And how am I? Who gives a shit? It's time to get into the NFC South, baby. That's what we got rocking today.
Absolutely. So here we go. NFC South preview. We're going to break down these four teams. We're going to start with the Atlanta Falcons, coming off of a 7-10 season in 2021, not making the playoffs. This is now Arthur Smith's second season at the helm, losing Matt Ryan and bringing over Marcus Mariota as quarterback, presumably, unless rookie quarterback Desmond Ridder takes the reins from them. Tyson, we're going to do best case scenario, worst case scenario, then our realistic expectations for the team. But just as a general overview of the Falcons, what are you thinking about them right now?
When I went back through and looked, I was pretty surprised to see that 7 in the win column. It just felt like less. And as time's gotten away from the season, maybe I've decided, in my memory that team was worse than they were. But they were a dumpster fire last year. Like, they might have won 7 games, and they won 7 one-score games. They were 7-2 in one-score games, which is maybe that's Matty Ice. But, I mean, they're below average everywhere, I think, position group-wise. If Drake London comes in and is the guy, I think they took him at 8. If he's that guy, if he comes in and has maybe a Jalen Waddle light type impact as far as receptions go, it'll help out the team tremendously. I mean, we're getting spoiled with Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and Justin Jefferson, all these guys throwing up these huge numbers. But if Drake London and Kyle Pitts can work together, and maybe, just maybe, Desmond Ridder's as good as they're saying he is in camp. Light years ahead, they say, Brad. What do you think about that?
Yeah. We'll see. I didn't like him at Cincinnati. I honestly, I think we will see Desmond at some point this season. Marcus Mariota, what we know about him is he will get injured. He hasn't played in a couple years. Maybe that helps him out. But he's reuniting with Arthur Smith, who eventually did bench him when he was the OC in Tennessee for Ryan Tannehill. So we're going to see how this little reunion goes. I think losing Matt Ryan is a big deal. He wasn't great the last 2 years, but he was a stability there at that position that the Falcons had. They just failed to build around him. But you mentioned it, Tyson, 7-2 in one-score games last year. That was third in the league. I think there's going to be a lot of regression for them. I think this team is going to be one of the worst in the NFL. On top of the regression, I think is going to come. They had the third healthiest team in 2021. That's not going to stay the same going into this season. They also faced the 9th toughest schedule win total-wise based on the Vegas projections on who's on their schedule. That does not bode well for this Falcons team, who I don't think improved anywhere except for wide receiver getting Drake London, but you also lost Calvin Ridley. I think this is going to be a very, very tough year for the Falcons.
And one thing to keep in mind, we're kind of dunking on them as far as saying all these groups are below average. The quarterback was pressured at 28% of dropbacks last year for Atlanta. And they brought back every single offensive lineman from that unit. There's no upgrades. And now we're going to somebody, maybe we're running RPOs or whatever with Marcus Mariota. Too bad they're 29th in rushing yards before contact. There's nowhere to go. They're going to be really bad. And I think that C.J. Stroud might look really good in Atlanta Falcons jersey in a year.
Absolutely. We'll get to worst case, how bad we think it's going to be. We both think they're going to be bad. Let's say best case scenario. I mean, 7-10 last year, obviously their record, we laid it out in one score. We think that's going to change. For me, best case scenario for the Falcons is if everything goes right and the Panthers are absolutely horrible and they finish third in the division. I don't think that's going to be a case. I think this team is going to be a fourth place team, a cellar dweller across the league. Best case scenario, if everything goes right for them, I think they could maybe get the third place in the division.
I'm thinking best case scenario for me would be like 6 games. Like if they could sneak out 6 games on their schedule, there's no, illusion that this team is going to be a playoff team. There's just, to me, there's no way. But if Brian Edwards is the guy that John Gruden talked about in Oakland, right, that all of a sudden, if he hits, Casey Hayward, right, Rashaan Evans, like all these guys, everybody they brought in, they fill a role. They could maybe get to 6 wins. It sounds mean, but that's kind of where they're at.
And as far as worst case scenario goes for them, I kind of laid it out. I think this is going to be a bottom 3 team in the entire NFL. Worst case is the number 1 overall pick, which you can argue, is that really the worst case scenario? Because you're going to have your option of choosing between CJ Stroud out of Ohio State or Bryce Young out of Alabama to be your future franchise quarterback. Is that really the worst case? Probably not in a future look at things, but that is really bad to, in Arthur Smith's second year, finish with the worst record in the NFL.
Worst case scenario for me is they get, 3 days down the road into camp. They look at the roster, realize we're not going anywhere, and Deion Jones is on the block or getting cut as a cap casualty. He makes $5 million more than the second highest paid player in the Atlanta Falcons. Drake London can't get separation. He didn't get separation in college. Worst case scenario is he can't separate in the NFL, and you got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, right? And then we're in a way worse spot than we were. Unlikely, I think, but there's a chance this is like a 2-win football team.
Now, as far as our realistic expectations, we kind of laid out best and worst. I think realistic, kind of what you're looking for here, is I expect Drake London to pop. I do. I liked him a lot coming out. I think he could have flashes, and I think we're going to see Desmond Ridder. We're gonna take a look to see if this guy really is the future for the Atlanta Falcons, and if not, okay, you're bad, and you're going to have an option to draft a quarterback high here. As far as what we can expect, we got to see if Arthur Smith can actually coach. We're going to see improvements on offense if everything goes well, and we'll have an idea of whether or not he's the guy at the helm there either.
Realistic expectation for me is that Kyle Pitts becomes a household name, superstar, tier 1 NFL player. The rest of it is the rest of it. I just think this guy is going to be enough. I'd see 4 wins. That's somewhere around there. I think is realistic, 4 or 5 wins. But they're going to have to be looking at guys. Drake London's 21 years old. Kyle Pitts is 21 years old. Let's feed these guys, look and see, where we're going in the future. Because, I don't like Desmond Ridder either. I don't think this quarterback of the future is on this team. But we'll get a chance to find out, like you said. But I think that could be part of the reason that they stay at the bottom of the league.
And we'll see a lot of Desmond Ridder in preseason as well, I'm sure. Okay, Carolina Panthers, interesting offseason for them. Coming off a 5-12 record, really, really bad tenure for Matt Rule here, is going into his 3rd season, obviously on the hot seat. Turnstile at quarterback, as now they're bringing in Baker Mayfield to be their 4th starting quarterback in 4 years. So good job there. He's presumably going to win the job over Sam Darnold. I would expect that.
Could you imagine?
Oh my God, that would be an absolute disaster. The Panthers itself, they're going to have to make leaps and bounds if Matt Rule wants to keep his job. There's a rumor maybe he won't even if they do, he might not even keep his job. Overview for the Panthers for you going into this season.
First of all, Matt Rule is the longest tenured coach in this division. So maybe we should put some – I'm just kidding. He's so bad. I think that dude's out of there. I think we look at this team, they blitzed an insane amount excuse me, a year ago. And now they lose Hassan Reddick. They had a really awesome secondary last year, was able to make up for a lot of kind of the lapses by all those blitzes. They lose Stephon Gilmore. Not that he was insane, but Dante Jackson's okay. J.C. Horn's coming off of a 3-game season as a rookie. Now that's kind of a question mark. The offensive line was bad. They went out and they got, a couple offensive linemen, and they drafted Conwu there at, pick number 6 or something like that. So I think realistically, same thing again. This team's going to be really bad, and we're going to be looking at DJ Moore. Can Christian McCaffrey stay healthy? And does Baker find a way to turn this into a $15 million a year job?
I am actually a little bullish on the Carolina Panthers with Baker Mayfield. And
we did this last year, brother.
But I'm not the biggest Baker fan. I'm a little bullish here. Anything is an upside compared to Sam Darnold, for God's sake. Dude, that guy is so bad that anything that Baker can give you is a plus.
You mean
That's a
Vanilla
plus
Vic?
over.
He had like 8 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, and then the wheels fell off that wagon. But anything's a plus over what the quarterback unit was last year. I mean, it was so bad. It was awful. 31st ranks as a unit, 31st ranking as a unit, second worst in the NFL. I think anything Baker can give you is a plus. Plus, bringing in Bradley Bozeman at center, drafting a Conwu as your bookend left tackle, I think is great. And Ioannidis on the D-line and Xavier Woods in the secondary. I think there will be some improvements here. Best case scenario for me, Tyson, is they finish second in this division, and it looks like a competent football team. There is some improvement there, and they started off the season decently well in 2021 before the shit hit the fan.
3-0.
3-0, and they looked good and competent, and everybody got hurt. We'll see what happens. They're 2-6 in one-score games. That's 28th in the league. They can definitely flip the switch on that and win some games that they didn't last year.
And let me just rattle off some stuff at you here because it sounds, maybe like we're over exaggerating how bad this offense was. Last in yards per play, second in turnovers, 31st in passing touchdown, 14, by the way, through the most interceptions, last in net yards per passing play. They averaged 5 yards.
Dude, that is so bad.
Per attempt. Like that's not real. 31st in expected points contributed by offense. They were worst. They're the worst offense in the NFL almost all the way across the board. Best case scenario for this team, they won 5 games last year. I think that this team, best case, could be like last year's Atlanta Falcons, and I'm looking back and I'm going, they won 7 games? That's interesting. I mean, I think DJ Moore's a superstar. If you've been listening, you know that. We'll see. I just think we'll get to it in worst case, but I think best case scenario, they could win like 7 or 8 games.
Now, as far as worst case goes, I mean, you're going to have a coaching change in the middle of the season because it's the disaster. Baker doesn't fit the bill again, so you're looking at Matt Corral. Is he your guy? You're kind of finagling around different quarterbacks and things like that, like they've done for the past 3 years. Christian McCaffrey's hurt. Who knows what's going to happen, with his health after the past 2 seasons? But it kind of goes back to the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, the Panthers have not selected quarterbacks highly in draft classes the past 3 years under Matt Rule's tenure. But if they do finish very poorly, they may have an opportunity to draft a quarterback high and really start the rebuild instead of trying to cherry pick and get veterans. So worst case scenario, they're awful. They have a new coach and there's a new tenure under owner David Tepper. Is that really the worst case, though, if Matt Rule clearly can't coach in the NFL, if they're awful and there's continue to be a turnstile at quarterback?
No, but I'll tell you what is. Who's his offensive coordinator?
It is Ben Mcadoo.
First-year offensive coordinator. This guy's staring over his shoulder. He wants his shot again. Carolina hasn't made a good decision since they let go of Ron Rivera. You say they don't invest in high draft capital on quarterbacks, but they did trade 2 second-round picks for Sam Darnold. Like that happened.
Oh man,
and that's ridiculous. Like that, it's just ridiculous. I think Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again. They can't throw the ball. The defense takes a step back. The offensive line still sucks. And this team is now, they're a 2-win football team. I think them and Atlanta have very similar floors. It's just I think Baker's better than Marcus Mariota. I don't know what kind of Baker Mayfield we're going to get, though, because I don't know exactly how he's going to fit in this scheme. And that's something that I'm interested to see. And I'm sure we'll hear more out of training camp. But Baker and star wide receivers and stud running backs. It's not shown to be an incredible combination here in the NFL.
That's true. That's true. And as far as realistic expectation goes for this team, a bad team. They're just going to be one of those teams in the schedule that you can pencil a win in. I think obviously it's the NFL. Anybody can lose at any time. But Ben Mcadoo spent his last season as a consultant with the Cowboys. He kind of was shamed out of the Giants. How does he mesh with Baker Mayfield? Doesn't seem like their offenses click. Does Baker have that chip on his shoulder? I think he does, but is that going to translate to the NFL? Hasn't so far, and it hadn't worked out in Cleveland where they had a much better unit around him, all top to bottom basically on that offense. Realistically, I expect them to be better than last year. I mean, I just don't know if you can't get worse than what they were offensively last year. So I expect them to take steps forward. I expect this team to win 6 or 7 games this year.
That feels high to me, brother. I'm just going to be honest. And I was all over Carolina last year. I know they were 2-6 in one-score games, and we're always talking about regression to the mean with a lot of these stats. It's just that Baker Mayfield doesn't win one-score games either. Matt Rule doesn't win one-score games. You can run through track records of these guys, and sometimes regression to the mean sounds really good until you dig into the numbers, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think this is going to be a 6-1 football team. I think, like I said, best case, I'd bump that probably to 8. But it's just this. There's nothing special here, and luckily for them, they're in a division with 2 really beatable teams and the Buccaneers. So they're going to get 4 a year where they at least have a shot. And if you can pencil in 2 of those, it's easier to kind of pick out 4 others throughout the schedule. But they started 3-0 last year, and then they were one of the worst teams in the league to close it out. So they're rolling that momentum over, and the only thing that's changed is they switched from Sam Darnold to Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, a bunch of middle-tier quarterbacks there. I like the thought process behind New Orleans Saints, and give it a little teaser that they're going to be a beatable team this year. We're going to dive into them now. We get a little more meat on the bone in this division conversation. Saints finished this 2021 season 9-8, just missed out in the playoffs. This offseason saw Dennis Allen take over for Sean Payton, who stepped down. This is his first season as head coach, besides when he was disastrous for the Raiders. Pete Carmichael's still the OC there, so you'd think there'd be some sort of continuity there. It's his 14th season as OC for the Saints. And Jameis Winston's coming back after he tore his ACL. This will be his second season in a Saints uniform. I think they're beatable as well, Tyson. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, and they've been the past decade, obviously, with Drew Brees and Peyton. Why don't you give your overview on them, and we'll dive in from there?
It kind of feels like when you're watching a television show and the main character leaves and they drag on for a couple more years and then the other important character leaves. That's where we're at with the Saints. And we're giving them a bunch of respect for the last 15 years. But when I look at this team and I see a first-year head coach and then you run down the roster, if this was Sean Payton leading the ship, then maybe, an over-under of 9 games would make sense. Right now I'm looking at this thing, and receiving core is basically going to be Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry. Michael Thomas, if I don't see him catching balls against the air by the middle of August, I'm counting that guy as cooked. That's where we're at with that. Cam Jordan's a beast. Alvin Kamara is a beast, but we don't know if he's going to get suspended. The defense was really, really good last year. Demario Davis, another year older, however, for a guy that relies a lot on speed as the captain of that defense, I'm kind of intrigued to see how that goes. +7 in the turnover margin. That's not a Jameis Winston football team. I don't care how much the people say he's changed. We didn't get to see it. So my general overview is it could go one of 2 ways. Maybe they're a lot better than I think, but in my view, they're worse than people are kind of expecting.
I completely agree with that. I don't see it. Dennis Allen was a disaster.
Horrible
for the Raiders. I just don't see how he's going to come into this situation and make anything different. I mean, he's going to have to be the head coach. Like, he's not going to be able to run that defense and hand it off to Pete Carmichael. Sean Payton was also very instrumental in allowing Jameis Winston to kind of pull the reins back and not feel like he had to be so aggressive and be a gunslinger. I don't think Pete Carmichael is going to be able to make adjustments in the game without Sean Payton. Sean Payton was calling the plays beforehand. I just don't see it with this team. Now, with that being said, looking at the best case scenario for them, it is getting back to 9 wins, in my opinion, and being a knocking on the door for the playoffs. I think that's real. That's a best case scenario for this team. Obviously, maybe Jameis Winston spreads the ball and finds those receivers. Michael Thomas does come back and is effective. Then you have a good receiving core of Michael Thomas, Chris Olave in his rookie year, and Jarvis Landry. Alvin Kamara may be suspended. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't get suspended. That's a best case. And the defense continues to be really elite like they've been. But that would be my best case scenario. They're a 9-win team, and they're knocking on the door to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think my best case scenario is they steal that second wild card spot. If the defense stays the same or even just gets a little bit worse, but doesn't fall off of a cliff, we're still talking about a top 5, top 7 unit in the NFL by all advanced metrics. And then one thing that I think is important to keep in mind, they had the highest drop percentage in the NFL last year. And they also had the lowest or below average air yards per attempt and a really low average depth of target. And again, that's not a Jameis Winston football team. And Sean Payton's not there to be reining him in. I know that we've had an offensive coordinator here for 14 years. It's going to be different because, of course, it's going to be different. This is a new thing. You might have been an offensive coordinator for 14 years, but now you get to call plays. You're doing a bunch of stuff now that you haven't been afforded the opportunity to do very much throughout your NFL career. I think best case scenario, everything clicks, and we're talking about last year's Philadelphia Eagles.
Now, on the flip side, worst case for me, this team's a disaster. Jameis turns the ball over like crazy. That defense looks mortal as they're continuing to get older. Obviously, Cam Jordan, their star, he's getting older, and he's decreased his actual snap percentage, which has helped him have some longevity. But Marshawn Lattimore, he's actually regressed since he signed that major extension. So I think this team's gettable in this division. Worst case scenario, the Panthers are a better team than them. And this team finishes third in their own division, which would be shocking, I think, for a lot of people out there.
That would be. I would say worst case scenario, this team wins 5 games. I think it's really fun when you look through, and I love Tyrann Mathieu. I love Jarvis Landry, all these guys. But when you look at them and then you look at the rest of this roster, these aren't – like Jarvis Landry isn't going to win the Saints any more football games. Tyrann Mathieu is walking into a top 3 pass defense unit in the NFL. Like how much better realistically are they going to get at the back end there? Marcus May, same thing. Like, completely overhaul the safeties, but that wasn't what our issue was. We don't have anybody that can catch the ball.
Yeah.
And we go out and we trade a king's ransom to get Chris Olave. They traded quarterbacks draft capital to go up and get a silky smooth wide receiver. Problem is you can either end up like Justin Jefferson or you can end up like everybody else. Because there's a lot of guys look like Chris Olave in the NFL. I think he's going to be a stud. I'll put that on the record. But there's a very real world where he's just too little. Jameis isn't accurate enough. The team falls apart. And, we're sitting here a year from now, they don't have their own first-round pick, and we're like, what happened to the Saints?
Yeah, as far as realistic expectations, that my thought process is going into the season regarding the Saints, I think they're going to be worse than last year. Me personally, I think they win 7 games. They go 7-10, and some things click some weeks, and some it doesn't. Kind of like that Tampa Bay Buccaneers Jameis Winston team. Like there's going to have moments where the offense looks awesome, the defense is going to look great in spurts, but this is an aging team that I think is going to have some trouble. Now they do have the 9th easiest schedule and win total projections. That's going to help them out, especially with their 7th most injured team they had last year. But they were injured because they were old. And how much is an easy schedule going to help them out with a quarterback who's a wild card and can turn some of those easy games into ones where you're trailing now because you're turning the ball over too many times or in inopportune times? I see 7 wins out of this team, and I don't think it's going to be a very good season for the Saints.
I think 7 is my number there as well. I really like Alontae Taylor, the corner they drafted. Trevor Penning, obviously, he's going to be a day 1 starter for them. So those guys I'm intrigued by. But the rest of, the roster is the same. And in our show notes here, you put Michael Thomas with a question mark under star players.
Yep.
We haven't seen Michael Thomas play football in 2 years.
What is going on there?
Like, Antonio Brown's a better NFL wide receiver over the last year and a half than Michael Thomas. Julio Jones is a better, we're talking about, like, what are we, star player? How about guy on the team? Get back in the locker room, Mike. And that's another thing. Like,
and don't have people hate you in that locker room.
And one more thing, too, on the Saints. I love Alvin Kamara, probably one of my 3 or 4 favorite players to watch in the NFL. It pains me to say, but when running backs turn 26, traditionally, he's got less tread on the tires, so there's a chance. But Lesean McCoy is the last guy to last with this kind of playing style and put up elite numbers into his 30s. Okay, so we're talking about Alvin Kamara, who I think is a beast, but history shows that there's an age cliff for these running backs. And last year was the best year he's ever had running the football. And I wonder if he gets run a lot harder this year without Sean Payton. And then all of a sudden, a year from now, we're like, Alvin Kamara's in Todd Gurley territory.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you said that too, because the advanced metrics on Alvin Kamara show that while he had a great season running the football, wasn't as explosive and didn't have as many successful runs too. So there could be already that regression coming from when we were like, man, this guy's awesome. So that's
unless you're Derrick Henry, And even him, he broke his foot, right?
Yep.
It just happens. Adrian
It just
Peterson,
happens.
Frank Gore, those guys aren't normal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. We're rounding it out with the cream of the crop here, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year, an uber successful season, 13-4, winning the division, lost 27-30 in the divisional round to the Rams. Before the show, he said that we think if they beat the Rams, they probably would won the Super Bowl again. I mean, there's just no bad stats on them. Some little changes in the offseason. Tom Brady retired, then he didn't. He's back now. Third season in a Buccaneers uniform. Bruce Arians steps down, goes to the front office. Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator from the prior seasons, is now taking over as head coach. Byron Leftwich is still there as the OC. We expect Bowles to continue to run the defense, Brady and Leftwich to run the offense. But Tampa Bay Bucks, give an overview on them. What do you expect? Continuing rumors around the Brady Arians thing. I don't think that matters, but Tyson, give me your thoughts on this.
I think people are really sleeping on the fact that they went out and they got Shaq Mason, Akeem Hicks, Keanu Neal, Logan Ryan, guys that are come in and at worst be depth players, and at best, like in Akeem Hicks' case, right? We lose Ndamukong Suh, not really that big of a blow, right? If we get a whole season out of Vita Vea, we're in good shape here. I think, a team overview of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I don't know what you really need to know.
Like everybody knows these players, man.
This is Tom Brady. This is Chris Godwin not even getting placed on the non-football injury or the PUP list to start camp. It's just everything goes right for these guys, except for Matt Stafford being able to complete one pass there at the end of that game, or else they come back from 27-3.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't have anything else to say besides this team. They were the best team in football last year until they weren't, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the nice thing to think about with this team, we talked regression. There were 6-0 in one-score games, tied for first, and 2-0 in field goal games. I think that has something to do with number 12, who's just done that his entire career. Can you really expect regression when that guy's at the helm? I don't think so. I don't think so. Now let's get in the best case, because we don't. Everybody knows about the Bucs. Let's go best case. What are you expecting from the Bucs? Best case scenario, everything goes right.
Super Bowl. I mean, I don't have a regular season number. 13-4 is pretty damn good, right? 13-4 is pretty damn good. They threw the ball a ton last year, like the most in the NFL by a lot, like by 2 games worth. I don't think they can do that again. I don't think Tom Brady at, what is he, 43 now? 44?
45, I think. No?
45 years old. Jeez Louise.
I think he's turning 45 this year.
But they're not going to throw the ball as much. And they only, out of those 730 attempts or whatever they had, only 117 were play action. So if we can get the rush attempts up when they went out and they drafted Rachaad White in the 3rd round, he's actually a really good pass blocker and he can catch. I think will allow Leonard Fournette kind of to get back to what he was brought in there to do in the first place. Ronald Jones has stone hands and can't pass block. So Leonard Fournette was kind of thrust into the 3-down back role where I don't think that's exactly where they see him. Second least amount of rush attempts last year. I think that number goes up. I think everybody stays rested, stays relaxed. Mike Evans gets 1,000 yards, and this team wins the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I love it. I think this team's going to win the Super Bowl, too. It feels like it's written. Like Tom Brady's going to go out, come back, and go out. Now, I think that's the best case there, too. Like what you said, I can't dispute. I mean, we're thinking very similarly with the Bucs. Like everything goes right. This team was, once again, going to be the best team in the NFL and compete, and I think win the Super Bowl if everything goes well for him. Worst case scenario is this for me. You added Shaq Mason at guard, and you added some good pieces on defense. I love the Akeem Hicks pickup, but you lose JPP. You lose Ndamukong Suh. Alex Kappa's gone. He went to the Bengals. Ali Marpet retired. Gronkowski's gone. Jordan Whitehead, the safety's gone. You lost some of your identity, and yeah, you can bring some guys in, maybe a little hungrier, and you still have your core that you really want. Worst case scenario, and you mentioned the running, maybe Leonard Fournette falls off a little bit. Like he's been great the past 2 seasons, what they've needed for him. And yeah, bringing in the rookie running back, and you have Gio Bernard there, sure, that's good, but maybe things don't go well there. And Chris Godwin's not as explosive, and Mike Evans getting a little older. They did bring in Julio Jones. I actually like that pickup a lot for them. And Russell Gage, I think, will be a good little addition there. Worst case scenario, though, for me, I still think they make the playoffs. Worst case is they lose early in the playoffs like they did last year in the divisional round. And we're like, damn, I mean, is Tom Brady going to retire, or is he going to Run it back one more time.
Worst case scenario for me is like Todd Bowles oversteps bounds here and kind of gets back to that guy that we saw, even though Todd Bowles wasn't the worst Jets coach that they've had out of the last,
which is crazy,
4 or whatever. So it's hard to even judge people that were over there. But it feels weird to say worst case is like 11 wins in a division title. Like, I think worst case scenario, they still win the division. I don't see a way anybody else does it. Chris Godwin tearing his ACL. We know receivers don't all the way come back after in the first year, but it's been 7 months and he's already cleared. So that's got to be optimistic. Worst case scenario, 11 wins, division title, and Mike Evans still gets 1,000 yards.
I love you throw that in there for your boy. Realistic expectations. They're going to win the division. We're going to do our gambling preview, so we're not going to go into that here, but they're going to win this division. They're going to be contenders in the NFL like they always are, and they're going to be knocking on the door at another Super Bowl. That's what I expect from this team. I think that's what they expect from themselves, and that should be what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers accomplished this season.
My realistic expectation is at some point, whether it's the second round or the NFC title game or whatever, Tom Brady's going to have the ball with 2 minutes left. And we're just going to be like, well, fuck. And that, like, it's just going to – they're going to be in a close game in the playoffs, and they're going to win it. And it's going to be because they lost last year. And then we're all going to be like, oh, is he coming back again? And then he's not. I think if he wins, he's out.
Ooh, okay.
But realistic expectation, I think this team – at worst, they should be pissed off if they're not playing the NFC title game.
Okay, that's our NFC South preview. Like we said at the top, we're going to be doing previews for every single division in the NFL leading up to the start of football season. So like and subscribe to all of our social medias. Definitely YouTube. We're going to have a bunch of different stuff coming out on that platform as we get ready for it. Tyson, I know you are just fucking ready for this thing to start, baby. We're in training camp. We're going to have some shows around these training camp stuff and things that happen here as we get ready for preseason.
And we're going to be pumping out some college football pod conference previews there or whatever is left of the conferences. So those should be offset by probably a couple days on the release schedule. We haven't figured it out yet. But, yeah, man, it's almost August. And once it hits August, I'm not leaving – I'm in front of the computer reading stuff. I'm watching it's all football all the time for 8 months.
Absolutely.
If Kevin Durant could just get traded already, goddamn. You gotta get this. You gotta get this out of the way.
Then it'd be full football. All right, NFC South preview done. Stay tuned for our next divisional breakdown. We appreciate you guys watching as always, and we'll talk to you later, guys.